What is going on, Geeks? No Jive from the Geek Week here, and well, we've got a video today that absolutely no one asked for, and I'm quite sure nobody wanted. That being said, by no volition of my own, I did have the misfortune of watching the film Madam Web over the weekend. And sometimes in life, there are truly things you just can't keep to yourself. Now, I'm not going to guide you on a journey through the plot to eventually break down the interior writing elements at the end, to eventually give you my thoughts like I usually would. Oh no, that won't be necessary. Seeing as I had no intention of watching this film, let alone reviewing it legitimately, I can just tell you right now this movie is a hot mess. Outside of watching it ironically, I wouldn't recommend watching it at all. Coming in at a hefty 2 hours, I can all but guarantee there is something more significant you could be doing with that time. In fact, you really don't even have to take it from me at all. Why not just ask Dakota Johnson, the star of the film? Let's see how she feels about it.
Dakota Johnson probably never doing superhero movies again after Madam Web.
What? That's devastating.
You might have seen me in Anyone But You or Euphoria. You definitely did not see me in Madam Web.
No, folks, we've got a different sort of review planned. Seeing as I've found with these caliber of movies, I'm usually left with more questions than answers, I figured why don't I share some of those questions with you guys. No, I don't expect any answers, of course. Honestly, I'm not sure there are any logical answers to half these questions, but that's just what films like this do to me. A power like clairvoyance can be as simple or complex as the writer describes and defines it within their world. But you do in fact have to describe and define it. Without further ado, I give you Madam Web. Now, before I start, I just want to add, the audacity of Sony throwing in that Marvel comic book flip before the movie starts is just absurd. Stan Lee will be rolling in his grave as we speak, but I digress. Our story starts in the Peruvian Amazon in the year of our Lord, 1973. We are introduced to a pregnant Constance Webb as she scavenges the Amazon for a rare spider said to possess healing properties. Now, at first, we are led to believe that Constance is searching for the spider for the greater good of mankind, but we would later learn that she wanted the rare healing properties of the spider to cure her unborn daughter, who was suffering from a rare bone disease. Peptides in the spider supercharge its molecular structure, which is said can now be the cure to over 100 diseases. It is also said that the spider is impossible to catch and has never been captured. But of course, yes, the pregnant woman from another country will be the first. Constance is not alone, however. To accompany her on this mission, she enlists the help of a creepy man named Ezekiel for, and I quote, protection. Now where, when, how, or why she chose this man for protection while pregnant traversing through the Amazon is a question we can't begin to expect an answer to, but I'll move right on by that. We have much more pressing matters coming soon. Surprise, surprise, as luck would have it, Constance would find the ultra-rare spider. But even more surprising yet, we learn that Constance is not only accompanied by Ezekiel, but by a whole crew of researchers. What a joy! The group is pretty stoked about the find of a lifetime, that is, all except Ezekiel, as the man proceeds to commit a quadruple homicide, unprovoked mind you. Now I would elaborate more on the researchers that lost their lives, but the film doesn't care about them, so why should I? Eventually, Ezekiel would turn the gun on Constance, specifically stating that he didn't want to help people with the spider because nobody helped him when his family was starving. He also tells Constance that his path was not as clear as hers, and I'm honestly not sure if the two statements are related, but he's honestly just talking to talk at this point. Now, he kills Constance and he takes the spider before fleeing. Now, before we go on, I should add, the spider was also rumored to give people superhuman abilities, and at this point, I guess that's all Ezekiel wanted? Those abilities? Now, why no words were spoken at all, I have no clue. I mean, to my knowledge, the researchers were all unarmed, so killing them was definitely unnecessary. But our boy Ezekiel is just that evil. Evil and dumb. Really, really, really dumb. But we'll come back to this. While Constance lay bleeding out, She is rescued by a group of indigenous people, with a name I honestly don't care to look up. Now, these Amazon tribes must have an entirely different meaning for the word rescued, because not only did they not intervene in time, instead of administering aid to Constance that is barely clinging to life, they instead have her bit by a supercharged venomous spider, effectively killing her and making her child a spider baby. Cured of disease, but a spider baby no less. How nice of them. If that's not bad enough, after they help Constance give birth to her child, they put her up for adoption, contrary to what you may believe. Life's cold in the Amazon, G. And like any deadbeat parent, the tribe leader says when she's older, she will come for answers. He also said something about her being the only one that can change the future, and I knew from that point on, I was in for complete and utter nonsense. From there, we're brought to New York in the year 2003. And I feel like it's important to point that out because although the movie soundtrack was a 2000s best of CD, I think the film itself forgot several times what year it was. But I'll get into that as it comes. We are now introduced to Constance's daughter, Cassie, who works as a paramedic in New York City. The film not so subtly reminds us that she grew up without her parents, as we see her reluctantly accept a gift from one of her patient's children, expressing how much she loathes family. Now, what sort of demon spawn would react like that to a child? I'm not sure. But one thing can be certain, this lass hates family. Which honestly, in and of itself, is something that stuck out as rather odd to me. For someone who hates the idea of family, why choose a profession so closely related to keeping them together? Strange. We also get to meet her partner Ben, and hey, it's Adam Scott. He says funny things sometimes. While the two are out rescuing someone in a car that's about to fall off a bridge, Cassie is somehow trapped in the car. How? I really just don't know. But at any rate, she falls into the lake below. While submerged underwater, the tropes come right on cue, as the near-death experience unlocks her latent spider abilities. We hear the man that put her up for adoption as he gives us a tutorial on her new powers. He says she can be in more than one place at the same time, and only she can change the future. Now out of the lake, Ben is checking Cassie's vitals to see if she's okay. And at that moment, she experiences a time loop. Now it's not elaborated on what initiates these time loops, and it's most certainly not explained how she causes them to stop, so why don't we just call it plot convenience to save time. At any rate, she's not injured from the accident, and she leaves the scene. And it's at this point we're brought back to Ezekiel. 30 years later, Ezekiel is now incredibly wealthy, as we see him bring a date back to his lavish apartment. Now, initially, my mind wants to ask, how? I mean, he clearly stated that he had no interest in helping people, and that would include manufacturing and selling cures made by the spider, because though he would be profiting, he would definitely still be helping people. Obviously, with super strength and clairvoyance, he has the ability to obtain a lot of money, but it's never specifically stated to my knowledge. At any rate, don't focus too hard on that, because a whole series of nonsensical events is about to transpire. While in bed with his date, Ezekiel reveals to his guest that he's having a reoccurring vision of 3 teenage girls coming to kill him. He's troubled on how to find and stop them, which is quite strange considering, he can see the future. Which right there is our first indication that the use of clairvoyance throughout this film will have no consistency between characters. He then tells his guest that he knows the government has technology that can find people if you know their face, revealing he knows that she too is a government agent. Ezekiel then poisons her and takes her security pass to obtain the nonsense tech for himself. Wow, there's just so many things wrong here, I can't even wrap my head around it. Why don't we give the movie the benefit of the doubt and infer that the woman investigating Ezekiel is doing it because of the quadruple homicide? Now that being said, he has just stated that he knows they have tech that can find people if you know their face, and she is sitting across from him, staring at his. Why in God's name would he kill her? I mean, did nobody know she was there? I mean, if she's in fact a government agent, this man should have been caught right then and there. I mean, all of this went down in his own apartment. So dumb. So dumb. Now, the tech that he so desperately wants to help him locate these kids is a MacGuffin that not only makes no sense, It's not even necessary in the film. Everything the tech is used for in the film, he could have done himself if his clairvoyance was nearly as plot convenient as Cassie's. At any rate, the man has now killed a government agent in his own home, so surely he's a wanted man. Right? Sometime later, Cassie shows up to Ben's sister's bridal shower and shows Ben's sister and her friends how much of a doorknob she is. During the bridal shower, her and Ben are called to the scene of a fire. During the emergency, Cassie has a time loop panic attack, and she sees the future where Mike Epps gets in a car accident. And instead of telling him, she lets him die. What's a doorknob? Not long after, Cassie is at home when a bird decides to off itself and swan dives into her window. Seeing the sight of the dead bird causes her to use her powers correctly. Yes, you heard me. The dead bird. Not Mike Epps. The dead bird. As we see when she opens her window, the bird swan dives again, but this time it survives, making it into her apartment. How she was able to control her powers, I am not sure. Why she didn't use them to save Mike Epps, the world may never know. Now let's jump back to our buddy Ezekiel for a moment, as we see he's acquired the tech. And yes, literally, it's that vague of a concept in the film. Like, I'm not sure if he stole the world's first USB, a CD, a floppy disk, I literally have no idea. But at any rate, he's acquired the tech. And for me, to best explain this, I'd ask you to think of the sonar machine in The Dark Knight. Now, you'll have to forgive the comparison, because of course, Christopher Nolan's movie is a masterpiece, and his concept is well thought out. But if you would, indulge me. Bruce Wayne uses a device that sends out a high-frequency pulse that locates objects through sonar technology. On top of that, he then converts every cell phone in Gotham into a high-frequency generator, developing a highly detailed map of the city. Now, what you have in this film is more akin to a child who watched The Dark Knight and then tried to recreate that concept. Essentially, the tech can hack into any camera in the world and give a background check on anyone it scans. Again, so many questions. I mean, he only knows what the girls look like. He has no idea who they are or where they're from. I mean, like, was his plan just to scan every camera in the country until eventually he happened to notice one of the girls from his dream on a camera? I mean, at this point, he doesn't even know if they live in New York. I mean, what is happening? At this time, I should probably add, Ezekiel has a random desk girl assistant who, by his own admission, he pays a fortune to, help him look at cameras. Now, excuse the fact that it's 2003 and the tech looks like it's from 2031, but more importantly, hang on. How do either of them even know how to use it? Like I said, it's 2003. People are just figuring out regular cameras, and internet, mind you. We're led to believe that either of them would have any grasp on how to use any of this technology. To reiterate, it's 2003. Ain't even that many cameras to tap into, to be honest. I mean, not nearly like today. Which only beckons me to remind you that none of this is needed. Because this man can see the future. I mean, at this point in the film, Cassie has almost mastered her powers, and all it took was a dead pigeon. Meanwhile, Ezekiel has had powers for 30 years now, and all he can muster up is a fever dream. What? Anywho, Ezekiel and his desk girl, who is seemingly an expert in espionage, are able to locate all three girls. And oh, as fate would have it, they're all in the same place, at the same time. What fun. The three girls board a train and Ezekiel heads their way. Now also, as fate would have it, Cassie also boards this train. Ain't that just the darndest thing? While on board, Cassie begins having another time loop panic attack. But as I mentioned before, since her encounter with the pigeon, she's able to decipher these visions now. Cassie becomes aware that the three girls are in danger, and she guides them off the train before Ezekiel shows up. Now, when Ezekiel does show up to attack them, however, we get something in the film that, mind you, is chocked full of things that absolutely baffle me. We get something in the film that is truly devoid of any and all logic. Ezekiel shows up to attack them dressed up as a goth Spider-Man. Now I'm just left asking myself, what part in this man's motivations, or better yet, lack thereof, would require him to be running around in a spandex spider suit? I mean, this man is wanted for like 5 murders, and you mean to tell me he thinks it's beneficial to run around in a spandex spider suit? Right, because the one thing every wanted criminal should do is draw attention to themselves. Right. But nevertheless, he would do just that, as Ezekiel attacks the girls and the police. Now, for the second time, we'll give the film the benefit of the doubt and say that Ezekiel killed all the officers, though I didn't see it on the screen. Surely one of them would have walked into dispatch that a grown man dressed in a spandex spider suit is attacking them, but alas, no. Ezekiel's tech girl not only hacked the CCTV cameras at the train station, but now she's edited out the footage of the poor man's Spidey, and is clearly framing Cassie for the kidnapping of the 3 girls. Yes, I know what you're wondering. How? But, what can I say? He pays his desk girl the big bucks. There's nothing this story can throw at her that she can't handle. Right? Right? Let's keep going. Cassie manages to escape the train station with the 3 kids, who at this point, to keep things simple, and honestly just for my own enjoyment, we'll refer to as the Spider Kids. Speaking of the little spider buddies, at this point, not one of them has questioned for even a second why a grown man dressed in a spandex spider suit is trying to kill them. But that's just teenagers, am I right? Cassie would then drop the kids off in the forest, which is plot convenience at its finest, because without her having any knowledge of the tech that Ezekiel is using, taking them to be alone in the woods is just a different kind of stupid. Of course, we the viewers have the misfortune of watching this plot unfold, and we know that the forest is in fact the safest place for them. But like, how is that her first decision? But what am I doing? Let me not get hung up on it. Anyway, Cassie leaves them there and goes back to her apartment to look over some of her mom's things. And in an old book, she finds a photo of her with Ezekiel. While Cassie's doing that, the Spider Children decide that waiting in the safest spot for them is for losers, and they leave to go get food. Now, at this point, not only have they not asked why they were attacked, they straight up just don't care. Teenagers, am I right? Luckily for them, while all that's happening, Cassie has a vision of Ezekiel arriving at the restaurant and killing them, and just as our buddy Fate would have it, Cassie makes it there in time to rescue the trio before Ezekiel shows up. Of course, since the restaurant has CCTV, Ezekiel is able to use the tech to identify Cassie on the camera as the daughter of the woman he killed 30 years ago. A lot of surprises for a guy who can, see the future. But at this point, I'm pretty much just convinced that everybody but Cassie's clairvoyance was nerfed, but whatever. Cassie ends up taking the kids to a motel because in this reality, it's more likely for people to have CCTV cameras at their house in the year 2003 as opposed to a public motel, but okay. And like father, like daughter, we see Cassie abandon the children yet again, this time to go wander around the restaurant that they were at before. When she arrives, she comes face to face with Ezekiel. And before I get into all this buffoonery that was this scene, I'm not sure if their conversation took place in person or within the magic thread of time, whatever that means, but the two met and they talked all the same. Now, do you guys remember when I said Ezekiel was dumb? Like, really, really dumb? Well, he would go on to ask Cassie, and I quote, "Do you think you can beat me with your mind?" Then in the very same conversation, provoked by absolutely no one, he would go on to tell Cassie everything about himself and his intentions. Things like how he can also see the future, that he plans to use the tech to find and kill 3 teenage girls. Oh yeah, and that he killed her mother. All things Cassie had no way of knowing prior to the conversation, and all things Cassie did not ask this man. Now, despite Ezekiel having the brain capacity of a toenail, and despite his clairvoyance abilities being completely nerfed, while having this conversation, he does know where Cassie is currently. He is looking at her. You would think maybe he would try and apprehend her, perhaps in the hopes that it leads him to the Spider Children? But no, he'd rather divulge self-incriminating information about himself to an absolute stranger, who, I cannot stress this enough, did not ask that man for any of that information. When she gets back to the motel, Cassie teaches the children CPR for about 2 minutes, in hopes that it'll protect them from the supercharged nuclear spider bites. Yeah. After that, she informs the spider children that she'll be leaving them yet again, this time to go to the Peruvian Amazon to find the answers that her mother couldn't. Now, there is just so much to unpack there, but honestly, I can't. I just can't. She leaves the kids with Ben and she takes off. So, if you are still following me, yes, Cassie is now just wandering aimlessly through the jungle in Peru. At this point, my mind can't even comprehend what's happening, but as she wanders aimlessly, she is met by her tribal dad that put her up for adoption. In typical deadbeat fashion, he acts as if it never happened, and he tells Cassie the story about how he and his tribe killed, saved her mother and her. And honestly, I just feel the need to point this out, but he's clairvoyant enough to see the meeting with Cassie 30 years down the pipe, but he's not clairvoyant enough to stop a quadruple homicide that happened in his jungle 4 miles away from him. The deadbeat tells Cassie that Ezekiel was actually cursed for stealing the spider, which honestly I just found a bit strange, seeing as Constance was there doing the exact same thing. I mean, sure, saving her daughter was a more righteous cause, but it's not a selfless one. After that, the deadbeat tribe leader knocks Cassie's soul out of her body and tells her that her thread didn't start when she was born. From there, Cassie journeys through the thread of time and witnesses what happened to her mother and why she went to Peru in the first place. She's able to finally make amends with her mom within the threads of time. And no, it's not explained in any real detail. I'm honestly doing it a service right now, and I'm hardly trying. But once Cassie gets back, we learn the Spider Tribe leader is not only a deadbeat, but he's also unoriginal, as he rearranges the famous Parker quote and passes it off as his own. When you take on great responsibility, power will come. Bruh, just stop, bruh. Bruh, just stop. Now, I wanted to add this in because this wasn't needed, and it was just an extra added tidbit of stupid that I just felt the need to include. But while the Spider Kids are at Ben's sister's house, the film decided to add in Ezekiel's desk girl telling him that she has eyes on all of the houses of all of the friends and families of the suspects. Which, first of all, again, it's 2003. Only cameras at that point were at like street lights and on CCTVs at stores and gas stations. This was way before doorbell cams, but I digress. Secondly, she said she's checked all the friends and family. Cassie has literally like one friend and no family whatsoever. Even without cameras, how have they not found them yet? But not to worry, the plot would help us out again, and as Ben's sister not only goes into labor, but the idiot decides to bring the spider children with him, after he himself said, and I quote, "No one will ever find them at my sister's house." Bro, then why are you taking them out of there? Cassie, on the other hand, makes it back from Peru to New York in literal record time. Gotta be a Guinness record. I mean, I don't know if time is a thing in this world or not, but there's really too much to unpack. I just decided to let it fly. But once she gets back, she arrives at Ben's sister's house, all too late. As you all know by now, this storyline would break its own neck before inconveniencing one of its own characters, and as Cassie sees a puddle on the ground, her clairvoyance kicks into a gear we have not yet seen before in the film. Now she sees the past, and knows the puddle is from Ben's sister's water breaking. As she heads to help them, Ben and the spider children are attacked by Ezekiel. Now, at this point, the film just confirms something I had pretty much already gathered earlier while watching, and that is, Ezekiel does not care at all if he's seen, as whether they control cameras or not, at this point, there are a ridiculous amount of citizens who can clearly see a grown man dressed in a spandex spider suit chasing children. Now, Cassie's plot armor vision is not only able to save them all in that moment, it's also able to show Cassie the rest of the film, to which she uses to escape with the spider children. In the climax of the film, if you want to call it that, Ezekiel is smashed by a billboard for one of the sponsors of the film, and he dies. Because again, his clairvoyance is just nerfed to oblivion. While Cassie, on the other hand, falls into a lake. Luckily, the spider children are there to rescue her, and they fetch her from the lake, and they resuscitate her with CPR. Because, of course, you remember, they learned CPR for like 2 minutes. Of course, they are successful, and when Cassie comes to, she is now blind. Because when you're clairvoyant and you touch water, you go blind. But no, honestly, I have no idea at all why she's blind now. I'm not sure if the film does either. When she's recovering at the hospital, Cassie is visited by the spider children. And I'm honestly even more confused by this, because I'm pretty sure she just adopts them, which is absolutely bonkers because they all have families. I guess she just wants to be their mom now, so she's their mom now. And on top of being blind, she now can't walk. She's in a wheelchair. Now, I'm not sure if it's her muscle disease that she was diagnosed with before she was born and got the spider cure that returned, but honestly, I really don't care. What I find infinitely more interesting is that she now dresses like a member of the X-Men, for seemingly no reason at all. One of the spider children sets up the newest X-Men for an absolute disaster of a voiceover to close out the film. She asks Cassie, "Do you see us in the future?" And Cassie tells them, yes, as we see an absolute dumpster fire of future box office failures with the spider children all grown up. Cassie then directs this depressing horror show of a voiceover to us, as she tells us, in the future, we'll be ready. And then finally, she tells us, the viewers, the best part about the future is it hasn't happened yet. And you know what? That may be the one thing I agree with in this entire film. Because Lord, I hope I never see a future with another movie like this in it. Good Lord. I mean, with all the various questions this film left me with, the one I find myself asking is why? Why is this a film? Why was this okayed? Why did that doorknob Cassie let Mike Epps die? Honestly, even as I read this to you now, I am genuinely confused on so many levels. I'm honestly offended a bit as well. I mean, it should be a crime in at least 40 states to rob someone of 2 hours like this. But that's enough heavy thinking for me today. As always, guys, get in the comments, like, share, subscribe. If you'd like to see me torture myself with more films like this, feel free to suggest them. I'm always down to take suggestions. But if not, just please, no more for a while. As always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.